The soft light of dawn crept over the rim of the Viking village, spilling golden and gentle across the rooftops of turf and rough-cut timber. Smoke from last night's hearths drifted upward, blurring the line between earth and sky, carrying with it the faint scent of peat and pine. Along the narrow, trodden paths, dew clung to the wild grasses and stubborn weeds that pressed against worn boot prints left by neighbors days before. From within one of the longhouses, built low against the wind, with its roof threaded through with heather, a young villager stirred beneath a coarse woolen blanket. The air inside was cool and fragrant, with hints of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, and the muffled sound of livestock shifting in their pen beyond the wall signaled the start of another ordinary morning. The villager's eyes, pale as gray mist, opened slowly to take in the dappled lines of sunlight slipping through tiny cracks in the wood, gilding the interior in soft amber. He rose quietly, careful not to disturb his kin sleeping nearby, their breaths deep and even in the tranquil hush before the day awoke. Pulling on a tunic the color of fresh-cut hay and sturdy woolen trousers, the young villager let the chill of the floor bite gently at his bare feet before slipping into simple leather shoes. He paused by the doorway, hand resting on the smooth lintel worn smooth by years of touch, and breathed in the promise of morning as he stepped outside. The village lay still, except for the crows picking at scraps along the edges, and the faint bleat of a restless goat. Low fog threaded its way around the longhouses and past wooden fences, settling in bends of the nearby stream. The villager's routine began as always. Gathering a woven basket, he moved to the fishing nets stretched and drying on pegs, running his fingers along the coarse hemp, checking for tears with patient eyes. The tasks were neither hurried nor resented. Each knot, each careful examination was part of a rhythm that hummed beneath the surface of every day, grounding life here in the land of sea and sky. The air outside the longhouse was cool and rich, carrying the layered scents of earth, dew, and lingering ash from the night's fire. As the young villager stepped onto the springy sod, he drew a slow breath, letting the freshness settle. The ground beneath his feet glistened with drops that reflected golden morning, each blade of grass and bent stem holding tight to the coming day's promise. Farther off, the earth underneath the livestock pen gave off its own note, damp, pungent, alive. From the blackened ring of the household fire pit, a fragile ribbon of smoke rose into the crisp air, winding between beams of light and mixing with the sweet spice of sun-warmed heather. These were aromas not born of market or man, but the natural chorus of morning in his world. Each inhale seemed to stretch time, inviting quiet gratitude for the land's gifts, for the soft labor that would soon begin anew. With a woven basket at his side, the villager knelt by the fishing nets, dew wetting the knees of his trousers, work rough but familiar in his hands. As his fingers traced the coarse ropes, he worked in the hush of early day, punctuated only by the gentle stirrings of animals and the distant call of a tern. His soft concentration was undisturbed, the faint hum of the stream blending with the quiet clatter of livestock feeding nearby. 2 crows, glossy black and bold, hopped along the fence, watching as he checked knot after knot, their presence a reminder of the steady partnership between people and creatures in this place. Under his calm gaze, small tears in the netting revealed themselves, marks of long use and the relentless rhythm of the sea. But for now, the repairs could wait, the tasks unfolding at their own easy pace. In the lull, the morning stretched, as if promising that before the day grew bright and full of noise, there would always be a moment of gentle stillness shared with the fields, the woods, and the soft, scented air. A gentle breeze reached through the narrow door of the longhouse, lifting the coarse linen curtain that hung in its frame. The faded fabric fluttered in slow waves, stirring the cool interior with hints of the world outside. Crushed grass, distant smoke, the ever-present tang of the nearby sea. Beyond the wooden threshold, willows and birches clustered along a winding stream, their leaves whispering together as the wind slipped through, freckling sunlight on the bank. Shadows drifted across the packed earth floor, shifting and softening as the branches moved. Inside, the filtered wind danced along the shelves, lined with carved wooden bowls and sun-dried bundles of sage, softly rattling a clay cup. These small, moving pieces told the story of daybreak's arrival, of the quiet push and pull between shelter and sky. Outside, the breeze touched every corner of the sleeping village, coaxing loose thatches of straw from the rooftop edges and sending them drifting gently down to the grass below. Chickens strutted about their yard, feathers ruffled as they pecked at the ground, each move a calm acknowledgement of morning's work. The trees themselves seemed to sway in a lazy conversation, bending low and arching high, their silhouettes stark against the pale gold of dawn. As the villager continued his simple morning tasks, he paused now and then, glancing up at the way the wind animated the world around him. The curtain at the door made a soft sigh each time it lifted, as if the house itself were breathing in time with the land. All was easy motion, nothing rushed, just the gentle stirring that promised another day of steady, simple living. The villager took comfort in the familiar rhythm, knowing that even the wind's touch was woven into the fabric of a peaceful morning. The quiet of the morning settled deeply over the village, disturbed only by the soft, infrequent sounds that mark the slow waking of the world. From beyond the wooden fence and the loose thatch of the rooftops, birds announced themselves in short, silvery trills. Their calls seemed to linger just at the edge of hearing, woven into the hush between one heartbeat and the next. Closer by, a cautious step on the damp earth signaled the young villager moving from his home toward the first task of the day. Each footfall was gentle, more a press than a stomp, almost respectful in the presence of so much early light. Along the stream, water flowed in a quiet conversation with itself, bubbling and slipping over stones smoother than sanded bone. These were the patient noises that belonged to the village, and to the pace of life it claimed, unhurried, easy, as if guarding the silence like something precious. As the villager bent by the nets, hands steady and practiced, the faint rustle of his clothing brushed against the background piece. The subtle snap of a twig under his heel, nearly lost to the world, joined the gentle coo of a pigeon shifting overhead beneath the eaves. Occasionally, a goat would shuffle, hooves striking the packed earth with a soft thud, then fall quiet again, content to chew on morning grass. The soundscape held more absence than presence. Every echo seemed deeper for what wasn't said, for what remained still and undisturbed. The click of a wooden bowl set onto a shelf, the distant caw of a crow, and the rhythm of slow breath were all notes in a careful composition of calm. Between these moments, silence prevailed, wide, natural, and easy, allowing the villager's mind to drift with the morning, untethered by worry or rush. In this measured, subtle world, every slight sound only deepened the sense of rest that settled with the day. Inside the dim longhouse, where the air still clung to the coolness of night, another gentle stirring joined the slow rhythm of morning. Upon the wooden sleep-in platform, tucked beneath layers of woolen blankets and sheepskin, an elder of the household slowly emerged from sleep. Their breath, soft and even, mingled with the faint sigh of the wind through the heather-thatched roof. Eyes blinked open, unhurried and patient, adjusting to the gold-splashed shadows that painted the walls and beams overhead. There was no sharp alarm or hurried motion, just a subtle shift as the elder carefully turned, keeping the peace of the room unbroken. One hand reached out, brushing against the rough, familiar grain of a carved wooden support, quietly feeling the anchor of home. Outside, the distant sounds of birds and softly moving livestock provided a gentle assurance that the world was waking too, at its own easy pace. Across the room, the young villager noticed the faint movement and offered a silent nod, an everyday acknowledgement woven from countless dawns before. In this quiet, there were no words, simply the understanding born of family and daily repetition. The elder sat up further, pulling a shawl close against the morning's lingering chill, then gazed across the simple space filled with woven baskets, clay jars, and neatly folded linen. The silence within these walls was more than absence. It was comforting, deep, and steady, letting thoughts drift gently to memories of seasons past. A thin sliver of sunlight crept along the floorboards, lighting dust motes that danced lazily in the still air. For a few peaceful moments, the house felt outside of time, just two generations linked by the rhythm of waking, joined in a delicate choreography of silence and small, careful movements. The quiet was a gentle shield, cradling the beginning of the day as life slowly returned to every corner of the home. The young villager moved quietly through the soft morning shadows, every motion measured yet familiar. After nodding to the elder, he turned to stir the ash in the central hearth, coaxing small orange sparks from the night's coals until the faintest wisp of new smoke drifted upward. The cool stone under his hand and the roughness of dry kindling were well-known sensations, felt each morning beneath fingers slightly stained from days spent at work. His movements were fluid and unhurried. A thin reed of wood added here, a gentle puff of breath given there, creating a soft rhythm that grew with the gentle increase of light. As new flames crept over the wood, warmth began to return, chasing the last traces of the night's chill from the hard-packed floor and the woven walls. A simple cup, carved from birch, was lifted from a shelf and filled with cool water fetched just the day before, glistening in the tender dawn. The villager dipped his hands in the water, rubbing the sleep from his face and smoothing back wayward strands of sandy hair with simple care. He paused, looking briefly to the open doorway, where hints of the outside world beckoned, mist swirling, a fluttering curtain, the landscape still painted in gold and gray. With calm purpose, he set about his morning routine, gathering a bundle of herbs for the hearth, adjusting the woven mat before the sleeping platform, and carefully folding a stray blanket left by the fire. Each movement was small, deliberate, and quiet, nothing wasted, everything part of the gentle order of daily life. In these early hours before the commotion of the day began, the villager's simple motions shaped the peaceful mood of home, as enduring as the stones beneath the longhouse or the rising sun outside. Beyond the doorway of the longhouse, the quiet world revealed itself as rural and close to the coast, a landscape defined by wide open spaces and the hush of water always nearby. The village itself hugged the gentle rise of a grassy slope, with low timber houses covered in turf and heather lining a winding path that curved toward the sea. Between the homes, goat pens and small vegetable patches made a patchwork of green, brown, and faded straw. Here and there, driftwood fences kept the livestock in, while hardy wildflowers pushed through the stone edges, nodding gently in the cool breeze. In the distance, a handful of other longhouses broke the horizon, smoke drifting lazily from their chimneys up into the pale morning sky. Beyond, further than any foot traveled before breakfast, soft dunes met a ribbon of pebble-strewn shore, where the ocean sang its endless song, sometimes near, sometimes far, but always present, like a heartbeat beneath the slow, steady day. The life here was tuned to the land and the rhythm of the tides. Salt air mingled with the scent of earth and thatch, and the calls of seabirds echoed from craggy rocks along the waterline. Wooden boats lay turned over on the pebbles or bobbed quietly near simple piers, waiting for the next journey onto the open sea. Beyond the fields, pine forest crowned the slopes, roots tangled with moss and threaded with trails worn by generations of feet. Wooden drying racks perched near the water held netting and fish, evidence of the labor that supported every home. The village was no fortress, but rather a gathering of families shaped by wind, weather, and memory, living between the wild northern woods and the restless pull of the sea. For those within its bounds, each day unfolded with the steady, timeless balance of land and water, a life both humble and full, watched over by dawn, wildflowers, and the endless horizon. The village brimmed with quiet texture, every surface telling a humble story. The turf that blanketed the longhouse roofs was thick, spongy, and heavy with dew, streaked with bits of pale lichen and stray feathers dropped during the night. Wooden walls displayed careful carpentry, tool marks still visible, sun-bleached in some places and dark in the shadows. The earth underfoot offered its own tapestry, tangled roots pressed into the dirt paths, which glistened from the morning's last mist, and bore the faint tracks of geese and goats. Wildflowers, blue, white, and yellow, clustered in the cracks between stones, their petals trembling in the breeze. On the clothesline, woven linen fluttered, edges frayed from years of washing in the seawater. Nearby, a basket brimming with tangled wool and simple tools for spinning invited the first hands of the morning, while the scent of crushed sage crept softly from a clay pot near the doorway. Each part of the waking settlement offered a different kind of music and movement. Chickens scratched steadily through straw, flinging dust motes that sparkled in the shallow sunlight. The steady drip of water from the thatch echoed in a small puddle, sending perfect circles out across the mud. A goat rubbed its side against a smooth post, tiny bells chiming with each movement, while from the edges of the field, sea-washed stones gave off a low, steady warmth. Smoke from a distant hearth caught golden in the air, tying the morning together in threads of scent and light. The texture of life was everywhere, in the pile of rough-cut firewood, in the grain of a half-finished canoe pulled up from the tide, and in the calluses and stains on each villager's hands. In that first quiet hour, the landscape was as alive as any creature, layered with memory, motion, and the gentle patience of work just begun. Inside the longhouse, the gentle hum of morning activity centered on quiet preparations for a communal meal later in the day. The young villager gathered fresh eggs from beneath the straw, their shells still warm from the hen, and set them with care in a woven basket. The elder moved methodically about the hearth, pulling dried fish down from a hook overhead and selecting a handful of onions and herbs from the storeroom. There would be bread to bake and stew to simmer, each task drawing together small gifts from garden, field, and shore. The slow pace of these chores was soothing. Wooden bowls were lined up along the low table, ready to be filled, and water was set boiling nearby. The comforting aroma of yeast and green herbs drifted through the room, promising comfort and fullness to everyone who stepped inside. Each motion in the early light, kneading, chopping, stirring, spoke of care and anticipation, as much for the sharing as the food itself. Outside, other families in the little village made their own gentle preparations, sending children to gather driftwood for the fire, and men down to the shore to check boats and lines. Soon, nets would be mended in the sunlit yard, and the first flat stones heated for bread. Neighbors might stop by, always willing with a hand or a story, the sense of community as solid as the walls around them. As the day stretched on, people would gather, each carrying a small dish, a basket, or simply a smile. Everyone welcomed, everyone fed. For now, the young villager and the elder worked quietly, surrounded by the scents of earth and ocean, their home wrapped in silk threads of smoke and steam. From the first animal softly fed to the last bowl set on the table, all they did was tied to the promise of togetherness, a feast born from the land and from hands as steady and gentle as the dawn itself. Today, the day's preparations built toward more than a meal. It was the day when the village would share its quiet harvest, coming together to celebrate the return of longer sunlight after many dark weeks. The entire settlement seemed to know this in the gentle way people moved, voices quiet but cheerful and hands ready for work. This was not a formal or somber gathering, but rather a time when neighbors greeted one another as friends, sharing food and stories around tables, moved outdoors into the mild air. For each household, the tasks carried a familiar rhythm, gathering wild herbs from the meadow, shaping dough for the communal oven, fetching buckets of seawater to soak the day's catch. The young villager's focus was on baking bread with his elder, kneading the dough, brushing it with honey, then setting it to rise beneath a worn linen cloth that belonged to generations past. The process was calm and filled with small rituals. They marked a cross in the dough, whispered thanks to the land, and placed their hopes for sharing and good health into every gentle motion. As the morning moved on, more families drifted into the center of the village, bringing platters of dried fish, roasted roots, and fresh greens bright with oil and herbs. Children wove garlands with wildflowers and ran laughing across the green, their excitement growing for the evening's storytelling by the fire. While some mended nets or set up wooden benches, others prepared ready bundles of wood for a communal blaze that would be lit when dusk began to fall. Even the animals seemed attuned to the gentle promise of celebration, moving quietly but curiously among their keepers. The day would unfold not in sudden bursts of activity, but as an easy flow, everyone arriving when their work was done, each small contribution woven into a larger whole. By midday, the shared meal would begin, and as evening neared, music and tales would warm the spaces between neighbors. The anticipation was never rushed. It simply echoed in hearts and homes, humming softly, a reminder that in coming together, every small act gained new meaning. Beneath the gentle flow of preparation and the hushed joy of gathering, there was a quiet weight that colored the day with purpose. For the young villager, the task of baking bread, so simple on the surface, carried its own responsibility. The flour he measured had been ground from the last of the stored grain, and the honey was a rare sweetness, saved from months earlier when wild bees were found near the woods. He knew the importance of sharing what little they had, especially as the last winter stores ran thin, and spring's full promise was still weeks away. Each knead of the dough, each careful fold and shaping, was done with hands that remembered hunger as well as plenty. The elder, moving just as carefully at the hearth, glanced now and then at what was left of the dried fish and onions, weighing silently if it would be enough should guests linger longer or bring unexpected kin. Though no one spoke of it, everyone in the village felt the tension pulled gently beneath the day, like the tide working against the hull of a small boat, steady, quiet, not enough to disrupt the rhythm, but never fully forgotten. The villagers carried their burdens with a patient dignity, shaping every action with extra care. There was pride in offering even small portions, in making sure nothing was wasted, and every guest would find themselves satisfied, at least for tonight. When the young villager brushed honey over smooth rounds of dough and set them near the embers, he did so with a hope that the sweetness would reach everyone, even if each serving was thin. The shared meal, too, was laced with a feeling of both gratitude and waiting, a sense that the true abundance was not only in food, but in the company, the quiet understanding that what they had was enough, as long as it was given freely. Glances between elders and children held silent messages, each one saying, "We make do, we care for each other, we endure together." Even in the light laughter of neighbors and the scent of bread rising, the purpose behind these motions, the burden of providing, the need to stretch the land's gifts, remained, weaving their strength into the heart of the gathering. Before the preparations could truly begin, the young villager paused to ground himself in the day's soft hush. With both hands, he gathered a mound of flour from a worn wooden bowl and let it sift slowly through his fingers onto the broad table. The motion was almost meditative, slow, steady, the flour settling in a pale drift atop the fir-scarred wood, the faint smell of grain rising with it. He took time to knead the flour with cool water, his touch calm yet strong, folding and pressing in a patient rhythm. This simple act, turning raw grain into something with purpose, always erased the lingering fog of sleep and brought him wholly into the moment. Outside the open door, the world moved quietly. Distant gulls called over the shore, an easy breeze carried the salt of the sea, and somewhere behind him, the elder arranged dry kindling for the day's first blaze. Every sense was tuned to these grounding patterns. The work, slow and careful, designed as much for spirit as for sustenance. The elder, too, moved with careful intention, taking kindling from the brush basket and laying each stick in the hearth with practiced, gentle hands. The sequence was the same each morning, building a nest of twigs, then coaxing flame from smoldering coals shielded through the night. The fire's first crackling warmth brought a comforting orange glow to the low-beamed room, spreading an aroma of smoke and promise. The villager's dough began to rise as the elder's stew pot was set to the grate, the sound of bubbling water blending with the soft kneading, both actions slow and unhurried. Around them, the textures of wool, clay, and sunlit wood seemed to soak up the morning's quiet, anchoring the day with their familiar feel. In these shared, grounding rituals, kneading, tending fire, preparing the base for a meal, time itself seemed to stretch, gentle and undisturbed, making space for gratitude and the gentle work of shaping the day ahead. With the dough needing to rise, the young villager moved to the quiet, grounding labor of grinding the last handful of stored grain. He knelt beside the old stone quern in the sunlit corner, setting a small pile of golden kernels in its hollow. With slow, circular motions, he turned the top stone over the bottom, the faint rasp of grain becoming flour, a soft, steady sound beneath the hush. The smell was warm, earthy, reminding him of last summer's fields, the sweat and laughter of harvest, the hope saved in every seed. Each pass of his hand was patient, neither hurried nor forced, the rhythm flowing up his arms and anchoring his thoughts in the comfort of routine. The fine powder drifted, collecting at the edges of the stone in pale mounds, promising nourishment for today and memory of plenty even as stores grew thin. Across the room, the elder tended to another gentle ritual, lighting the oil lamp that hung beside the low, north-facing window. With careful fingers, a scrap of wool was teased over the lamp's wick, and the elder struck flint against steel. After a few patient sparks, a small orange flame took hold and quickly settled, brightening the cool interior with its steady, golden glow. The elder's face softened in the warm light, lines of care and wisdom drawn gently across their brows. Turning, the elder found the wooden comb and slowly brushed their silver hair, each stroke deliberate, smoothing the strands as if calming both mind and body. These simple acts, grinding, lighting, brushing, joined in a slow dance of morning tasks. They readied the mind as much as the hearth, each motion anchoring the present and honoring the gentle start of another day. Through these rituals, the space became peaceful and attentive, lined with tiny offerings to comfort and tradition that had shaped the quiet life of the village for generations. In the quiet center of the longhouse, hands acted as the true language of the morning. The young villagers' hands, worn but strong, bore the memory of seasons spent sowing fields, mending nets, and splitting wood. Small nicks traced his knuckles, badges from lessons learned in rain, frost, and sun. As he fed golden kernels into the old quern, his fingers moved with quiet confidence, knowing just how much pressure would grind the grain smoothly without spilling any precious flour. He paused now and then to lift his palm, dusted white, and brush a strand of hair from his brow, or squeeze a mound of powder between finger and thumb, feeling for just the right texture. The steady circle of his grinding revealed long practice. No wasted effort, only the soft rasp of stone and the small focused motions that echoed the routine of countless days before. Each touch was purposeful, the grip sure but never hurried, carrying the promise of a meal and the patience of someone who understood the gentle work of making a home. Nearby, the elders' hands told a story all their own, nimble and precise, despite the passage of many winters. Their fingers, slim and bent from years of careful labor, struck flint to steel with practiced ease, coaxing a shower of sparks into life over the lamp wick. The tips, toughened and deft, teased apart a scrap of wool, and moments later, the tiny orange flame flickered to life, brightening the room's shadowed corners. With deliberate care, the elder gathered a thick lock of silver hair and drew the wooden comb through it, untangling knots with a practiced gentleness that spoke of many dawns spent readying for both labor and rest. Hands straightened a woven mat by the hearth, then smoothed the blade of a small knife, laying it just so among the day's simple tools. Every movement shaped the space as surely as words, passing calm and comfort from one generation to the next. In these careful, time-worn hands, one set young and sturdy, one aged and skillful, lived the story of the village itself, told in each touch, hold, and graceful motion. The longhouse was small by the measure of palaces and city estates, but its soul felt vast, expanding to fit the life within its timbered walls. Sunlight slipped through narrow slits beneath the eaves, making stripes on the packed earth floor, and catching the soft plumes of smoke that curled slowly from the hearth. Every inch was shaped by patient craft, a patch here to block the northern wind, a shelf there to hold a painted pot, or a precious shard of amber washed up from the sea. Woolen blankets hung over the low sleeping platforms, smelling faintly of sheep and summer grass, while bundles of dried herbs brushed gently against the beams overhead. The stone hearth, set in the center, was both anchor and altar, its warmth spreading steadily through the air, so that in the cold months, every story and memory drifted back to its amber glow. On busy days, the little space filled to the brim with laughter, quiet conversation, and the sweet scents of bread and sea salt, woven together into something sturdy and welcoming. What made the home strong was not just the planks and packed clay, but the careful balance of order and memory held in every corner. Baskets of yarn and fishnets waited beside tools for mending, while small treasures from the shore, driftwood, shells, and stones smoothed by waves, formed gentle altars along the sill. There were no grand decorations, only tokens that served or soothed. A wooden toy left from a child grown up, a worn cloak draped over the elder's favorite bench, a long-handled spoon darkened by countless meals. The roof was low, creating a sense of nest and shelter, yet the rooms never felt cramped, perhaps because hopes and old laughter seemed to float just beneath the beams. In daylight, the home glowed golden, filling like a held breath. In darkness, it became a warm cocoon, sturdy against the wind. This was a place shaped not by space, but by care, a living memory built from hands, heart, and the slow, generous work of daily life. The longhouse walls, thick with packed clay, held the day's warmth and shielded the family from biting wind. The surface was uneven, its soft brown color patched with lighter smears from countless repairs, textured by the wide fingerprints of those who built and tended it over the years. Here and there, small impressions of shells and pebbles caught the light, reminders of children's curious hands pressed into fresh plaster after a storm. High above, bundles of dried herbs, sage, thyme, and sweet heather, hung from rough wooden pegs, the fading green and gold strands trembling softly with any draft. Their scents mingled in the air, earthy with a hint of sharpness, casting a gentle shadow of summer across the chilly mornings. The beams overhead were sturdy but rough, carved from local pine and darkened from years of fire smoke and careful care. Between each beam, baskets held nuts and berries, while worn clay lamps glowed with the softest orange, sending out ships of light across the tidy space below. Outside the door, a narrow stone path divided the grass, leading from the house to a small ring of flat rocks where water from last night's rain shimmered in puddles. The stones, rounded and slick, bore little patches of green moss, and the track of goat hooves, or the padded prints of a village dog. Herbs and wildflowers grew along the edges, softening the hard lines. Thyme crept between the stones, and bluebells dipped in the brightening sun. The path wandered between homes, branching off to storage sheds and animal pens, eventually tracing all the way down the gentle slope toward the sea. Fragments of old pottery were sometimes wedged between the rocks, pieces from cracked bowls given new life as markers or stepping stones. Each detail, from the thick clay beneath a hand to the fresh dew on a flagstone, made the longhouse and its lands feel deeply woven together, a sturdy, breathing patchwork of earth, plant, stone, and human care. As the comforting routines unfolded inside the longhouse, the world beyond its clay and timber walls awakened gently to the rising sun. Light fell on the cluster of thatched roofs, bathing each in warm gold while low smoke drifted from their chimneys, curling around upright poles and vanishing into the open sky. Along the stone paths, chickens began to strut and scratch, heads bobbing as they searched for the day's first meal, their soft clucks weaving a melody with the distant call of gulls. Goats nosed through dewy grass by the edge of their pen, sneezing as the new sun hit their faces, while one or two young lambs pranced in wild circles, chased by laughing children wrapped in bright hand-woven cloaks. At the water's edge, a band of fishermen dragged small boats down the pebble-strewn beach, their shouts low but full of energy, nets slung over sturdy shoulders, and their boots thudding softly against sand, still cool with dawn. Between the homes and out across the fields, grown-ups and children alike began their chores, every movement small but important in the life of the village. Bundles of twigs and driftwood were gathered for the day's fires, and kitchen gardens received their first careful tending, dew still sparkling on dark green leaves. One woman reached up to pluck stray herbs from the beams of her porch, gathering them into a fragrant handful to twine into braids for drying. Neighbors paused as they crossed the paths, exchanging a quiet word or a gentle smile, the simple greeting enough to anchor their shared day. In the space between one homestead and the next, wild hares darted through grasses tipped with yellow and white flowers, disappearing beneath old fences. Even the air felt lively, rich with the scent of earth, wood smoke, and sea, carrying the sound of footsteps, laughter, and song. With every gentle stirring, the world outside folded into the calm and care of the home, ready for another day's work and wonder. As the sun continued rising over the gentle slope, the paths between homes and fields filled quietly with the presence of neighbors and wanderers starting their day. The young villager, setting a basket beside the door, noticed old Gunnar limping thoughtfully past, his head bowed low as he muttered to himself, and cradled a jug of morning milk. Behind him, a pair of women walked side by side, arms woven together as they shared news from the shoreline, their laughter carrying on the sea breeze. From beyond the village's edge, a solitary figure appeared, a vendor wrapped in a heavy blue cloak with a weathered pack strapped securely to his back. Closer now, The vendor unfurled a roll of simple linen and quietly offered handfuls of dried berries, hooks, and gleaming shells to eager children trailing in his shadow. Each passing soul left soft marks on the dew-darkened stones, footsteps mingling old and new, their stories weaving themselves silently into the day's unfolding tapestry. Wanderers sometimes paused at the longhouse. A cup of water offered, a brief warm greeting exchanged before moving on. As the elder leaned outside to shake a blanket in the fresh air, a young mother hurried by with her toddler perched on her hip and a bundle of greens slung beneath one arm. The village dog, alert and amiable, followed its nose from neighbor to neighbor, sometimes pausing at the villager's feet for a quick scratch behind the ears before bounding to catch up with its next companion. The stone paths, ringed by moss, basketry, and wildflowers, were a living record of community, bearing witness to generations arriving, leaving, and returning again. Each person who passed participated in something larger, a thread in the tapestry that made the small village feel endless in memory and meaning. With every quiet exchange and simple act of neighborliness, the young villager felt the gentle strength of belonging, an invisible tie that lingered even as footsteps faded down the winding way toward the wide, waiting sea. As the young villager paused outside the doorway, slender fingers curled lightly around the handle of the battered basket. A robin flitted down from the branches overhead. Its red breast stood out against the soft green of the morning, wings flickering as it picked at crumbs left beneath the window ledge. The villager watched, unmoving, as the bird paused to survey its world. Head cocked, bead-black eyes, sharp and curious. The air seemed to hush in respect. Just for a moment, the only sound, the gentle rush of wings and the faint tap of a beak against stone. In that stillness, a shifting shadow played across the path. The dappled sunlight moved with the dance of new leaves in the breeze, blurring at the edges as the wind changed direction, weaving a slow togetherness of bird, light, and the small space between home and wild. A soft rustling came from the thicket beside the longhouse, barely more than a whisper, but enough to draw the villager's gaze beyond the robin. Leaves trembled along a low alder branch as a breath of wind slipped through, their silver undersides catching sudden flashes of sunlight. The sound reminded the villager of quieter stories, the gentle warnings of approaching rain, the secret footfalls of rabbits hidden from view, the memories of old dreams sometimes set adrift by moon or morning. Each faint noise was a messenger in the silence, an invitation to listen, to be still, to find comfort in the ordinary miracle of waking. As the robin finally slipped away into the blossoming green, the villager found a soft wonder in how much life could be held by such simple things. The cool shade of a moving shadow, the busy company of a bird, the ceaseless music of leaves blushing against the day's first light. As morning unfurled across the village, the colors of the world shifted softly in rising light. The dull gray and blue shadows of dawn began to withdraw, replaced by a warm gold that spread like honey over every rooftop, blade of grass, and weathered plank. The young villager, still standing at the doorway, watched as the humble earth beneath his feet brightened from cool brown to deep russet, touched with sparks of amber and cream. The moss along the stone path glowed emerald, each dewdrop strung like a tiny jewel as the sunlight angled higher. Farther away, the thatched roofs glimmered in stripes of straw yellow and sun-washed tan, edges silvered in places where the early morning mist had not yet burned away. Chickens, pecking busily by the fence, shone in bursts of rust, snow-white or glossy black, their feathers picking up the shifting rays in ways both familiar and new. The sky itself bloomed from milky pale into bolder blue, streaked here and there by the softest blush of pink, or the cool silver of worn clouds. The elder's woven cloak, draped over a bench to air out in the breeze, changed from muted slate to gentle lavender in the growing warmth, while the vegetables in the garden patches brightened leaf by leaf, spinach deepening to forest green, onion tops taking on hints of jade and spring. Even the worn wood of the longhouse doorway, polished by use and smoothed by decades of hands, displayed unexpected notes of gold, ochre, and creamy brown as the light grew bolder. Shadows danced and retreated, shifting forms with every passing minute. The curve of a basket, the outline of a moving child, slender tree branches trembling under a new sun. In every direction, What had seemed quiet and familiar only moments before now shimmered with subtle beauty, the world transformed by nothing more and nothing less than the slow, gentle arrival of day. As the village came to life, and the young villager moved from one humble task to the next, a quiet memory flickered just beneath the surface of his calm routine. It was the image of a winter morning, not long ago, when harsh winds had rattled every door, and food had grown scarce in the storehouse. He remembered the hush of hunger, the chill finding its way under every blanket, and the determined faces around the fire as the cold stole easily through the slats in the roof. On mornings like this, when the light warmed his hands and bread was in the making, he could still feel that old hunger at the edges, though the house now brimmed with gentle work and gentle voices. Each knead of the dough or careful tying of an herb bundle echoed his silent hope that the plenty of today might last beyond a single day, that the shadows of winter would not stretch back so easily, unnoticed, into the sun. Yet, even with spring's gentle promise, a small worry drifted alongside every planned task. Would the grain be enough if the rains were late again, and the harvest uncertain? Would the salt catch keep as boats cast out across changing tides? The worry was not sharp or overwhelming, but steady, woven through the patient stitches of a torn net, or folded carefully between flat stones set aside for another loaf. The elder, too, had their own quiet questions, sometimes glancing at the sky or the stores in the corner as a reminder of all that could change with one late storm or early frost. Still, the rhythm of daily life remained unbroken. Work done, greetings shared, blessings whispered in the golden light. The memory was fuel for gratitude. The worry, a thread tying the people together, both tempered and softened by the morning's simple joys. In this way, even as routine carried everyone forward, the past and future were never far, just quietly present, part of the silent wisdom that guided every step. The young villager's hands moved steadily over the dough, but his thoughts slipped toward a tale once told by the hearth. He remembered the elder's voice, low and warm in the flicker of lamplight, spinning the story of a fisherman who dreamed he could catch the sunrise in his net. In the tale, the fisherman set out alone, chasing the edge of dawn across a mirror of still water, determined to bring back hope for the village with the day's first light. The villagers, cradled together in the longhouse's shadows, listened in quiet, letting those bright images soothe the heaviness of a winter night. That story lingered long after, drifting like wood smoke into dreams. The idea that, if one believed enough, even the darkest season could yield something golden. The young villager carried that dream quietly, tugging at it on cold mornings, or when the wind slipped in and the future felt uncertain. It was not spoken aloud, but it floated through routine, a hidden promise that even ordinary hands might one day hold a bit of sunlight for the ones they loved. Today, as he shaped the bread and glanced at the elder by the fire, a silent question moved through him. Would the season ahead favor their patient work, or would they, too, find themselves searching for light with empty nets? He wondered if the others shared this hope, carefully hidden in the swirl of daily tasks and neighborly voices. The question was not heavy enough to disrupt the morning, yet it colored the simple act of kneading or sweeping or setting herbs by the hearth. Was it enough, all this gentle preparation, to keep sorrow at bay through another round of the seasons? He dared not ask aloud, for the rhythm of old stories and youthful dreams provided their own quiet answers for now, patient and unfinished, woven into each moment. In the comfort of shared memory and the slow tasks of daybreak, the villager found both his doubts and his bravery, trusting that the most important stories were those carried gently, day to day, in silence and in hope. With the bread now resting in its bowl and the kindling softly crackling in the hearth, the young villager stilled his hands and let the moment deepen. He straightened slowly, shoulders relaxing as he drew in the fragrant air. Wood smoke, flour, the green of drying herbs, faint ocean salt drifting in on the lingering breeze. No words passed between him and the elder across the tidy room, but the house felt full of presence all the same. Morning sunlight warmed a patch of floor, and he let his bare toes sink into the gentle dust, sensing the way the vibrations of daily life seemed to settle, soft and quiet around him. It was a quiet pause, neither an ending nor a beginning, just a heartbeat where the pressures of the world faded, and all that existed was the steady sound of breath, the radiant hush, and the living memory of warmth. The elder, too, rested in the hush, hands draped over the rim of a wooden bowl, eyes half closed as if listening to a melody carried by the light. Together they lingered in that stillness, not for sake of rest or reflection, but to truly feel where they stood, within the simple embrace of their small home, the ancient earth beneath their feet, the promise of another day unbroken before them. It was in these pauses, rare and restful, that the full meaning of all their small tasks could be tasted, beyond purpose or ritual, beyond memory or expectation. The quiet settled gently in their chests, filling them with a deep, honest gratitude for the presence of each other, for the quiet rhythms carried through their hands, and for the precious, unspoken promise of home. In that pause, with nothing demanded and nothing asked, life felt perfectly whole. Just for a moment, just enough. The scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the gentle spices of simmered stew as the time for the first meal arrived. The young villager placed a round, golden loaf on the low table, its crust still crackling in the cool air, and filled simple wooden bowls with hearty broth, the flavors drawn from dried fish, foraged greens, and onions. The elder, with steady hands and a soft smile, ladled stew for both of them, pausing every so often to brush a hand over the table's smooth grain or draw a little more warmth from the fire nearby. Without need for summons or ceremony, they sat close, shoulders sometimes brushing in the simple intimacy of shared space. It was a meal born from honest work, eaten in easy silence, each bite mellow and grounding, food that filled more than just hunger, but also spirit. Sunlight touched every surface, turning the steam rising from the bowls to slow gold, painting the moment with an unhurried peace. Outside, faint laughter and voices from other homes drifted on the wind, a quiet harmony that reminded the two diners they were not alone in their morning ritual. Children were already at play, and neighbors soon to exchange stories or news at the edge of the path. But, inside, conversation was not needed. The roots of understanding ran deep through every patient gesture and gentle glance. The villager tore a chunk of bread and offered it to the elder, a small act that meant everything, while the elder answered with a nod, their grateful look stronger than any words. With each bite, comfort settled a little deeper, joining the warmth from the hearth and the hush of the room. Both of them ate slowly, savoring the quiet and the company, finding sustenance not just in the food, but in the calm, enduring rhythm of living together beneath a shelter built by hand, guided by memory, and filled with the gentle promise of another day. As the meal continued in peaceful quiet, the world outside was quickly gathering into the full pulse of day. The village market, little more than a circle of benches and blankets along the main path, filled with the low murmur of neighbors exchanging baskets of root vegetables, salted fish, and bundles of wildflowers. Chickens darted underfoot, making sharp clucks and skittering out of the way whenever a child raced past with armfuls of kindling. Two goats, nosing for scraps, tangled their ropes with gentle determination, their soft bleats joining the chorus of voices and laughter. The sharp, briny smell of the sea drifted into the center of the village as a light onshore breeze rattled the wooden signposts, causing their old paint to flake a little more with every gust. Far above, gulls looped through the sky's growing blue, their calls swooping alongside the steady thrum of other life in the village below. At the edges of the settlement, the wind pressed tall grasses to one side, making them ripple in green and golden waves, while the stream that skirted the far fence gurgled softly over mossy stones. The makeshift market's stalls displayed new catches, gleaming fish, baskets slick and fragrant with seaweed, and simple pottery painted in fresh dyes. Sellers called out greetings in friendly voices, hands waving over their wares, while buyers paused to admire or weigh a bundle in their palms. The rhythm of hoofbeats and wagon wheels on the hard-packed earth echoed through the air in a steady pulse, joining the sounds of distant chopping wood and the tap of a blacksmith's hammer. Through it all, the fresh wind slipped over the rooftops, clearing the last shreds of mist and lifting stray threads of song and laughter into the broad morning. The village was alive from corner to corner, every sound and scent weaving together, making the world outside hum with a promise made new beneath every sunrise. Inside the quiet warmth of the longhouse, with soup bowls empty but the scent of bread still lingering in the air, The elder glanced out at the market bustle drifting through the open window. For a moment, the only sound was the lazy squeak of a wooden spoon left in the pot, and the hush of the fire as it settled lower. The young villager set aside the last crumb of bread and rested his elbows gently on the table, watching the sunlight pool across the smooth grain and settle onto his hands. For a long breath, there were no words, only the gentle closeness of home, the singing wind finding its way into corners, and the memory of laughter and voices floating inward from the world outside. In that hush, everything seemed perfectly enough. Then, as if marking the end of a blessing, the elder spoke with a voice barely above a whisper. "It is good to be here. It is enough." The words floated softly, shaped as much by silence as by sound, and they landed without ripple in the quiet space they shared. The villager answered with a nod and a gentle smile, neither rushing to fill the pause nor disturb its peace. Sometimes, words were a comfort, as warm and necessary as the food and fire. Sometimes, their absence was an even greater balm, letting the heart rest where it was, untouched and safe. In that simple moment, held without hurry or expectation, both knew the meaning of belonging, carried not by conversation, but by the subtle, tender truth that home is most powerful in its gentlest silence. After the quiet meal, the elder reached for a finely woven cloth, its edge carefully embroidered with tiny, repeating knots of blue and yellow, kept folded in a clay pot near the hearth. It was tradition here to mark the end of a meal by slowly folding this cloth, a gentle ritual preserved over countless seasons. The elder moved with calm precision, smoothing the fabric flat with worn hands, fingers moving along every seam as if tucking away a small blessing. The young villager watched, knowing each touch was thoughtful, every gesture a silent thank you to the land, the meal, and the day's labor. They joined in, lifting the opposite corner, hands meeting in the center as the cloth took its familiar square shape, layers gathering warmth and memory from each shared meal. The cloth was set aside beside the bread, resting like a quiet promise of more mornings to come. With the folding finished, the elder dipped a finger into a bowl of leftover flour and carefully traced a small spiral on the tabletop between them, a humble symbol of good fortune and the circular return of seasons. The motion was slow and practiced, handed down through stories rather than books. The spiral glistened white for a moment on the sunlit wood before the elder brushed it away, leaving the table smooth and clean. There was no need for words. The ritual itself filled the room with comfort and connection. To those within the longhouse, it was not only a custom, but a grounding pause, a brief space where gratitude and hope touched hands before all the day's tasks began anew. It was in these ordinary acts, folding soft cloth, tracing a symbol in flour, that the people wove their history, quietly anchoring every meal, every morning, to the timeless rhythm of home. After the rituals of folding and blessing, the elder lifted a lidded clay pot from near the hearth and brought it to the table. Inside, carefully arranged, was a simple dish of barley porridge, rich with the creamy scent of slow-cooked milk and sweetened by pieces of dried apple saved from the last harvest. The young villager's eyes warmed with recognition, for this was a food that had accompanied every season, at feasts and lean days alike, its recipe passed quietly from hands no longer present. The barley, milled from the family field, and the apples, dried by the smoke and sun of the past summer, were reminders that what endured in their village was built on small acts of care. Each spoonful felt like a shared memory, the hearty taste carrying traces of laughter, old stories, and comforting arms from years when the villager was only a child. The elder served the porridge with gentle pride, scooping it into wooden bowls and topping each with a scattering of foraged nuts and a thin drizzle of honey, a rare treat that gave sweetness to the meal. The young villager took that first bite slowly, grateful for the familiar blend of grain and fruit, a flavor untouched by the passing of time or season. Long ago, the elder's own mother had stirred the same recipe with the same careful hands, and now, as sunlight stretched across the room, the tradition repeated itself quietly, threaded into the simple act of sharing breakfast. To eat this porridge was to acknowledge every ancestor who had weathered both storm and calm, every gathering by firelight, every morning begun with careful hope. Around this table, the food was lineage, binding those present to generations behind, and those yet to come. In that taste, in the warmth of the bowl and sweetness of the honey, the young villager found strength not only for the day, but for the memory and legacy of all who had come before. Around the table and hearth, the home was filled with objects shaped by careful hands and honest effort, each one telling quiet stories of the land and the people who worked it. There was a wooden ladle, its handle dark from use, smooth from years of stirring thick porridge and broad stews. Every curve bore the subtle mark of a knife, and the end had been engraved with a simple swirl, the same spiral drawn in flour a few minutes before. On a shelf near the fire, a sturdy stool stood ready for any hand or child who needed it, its seat worn to a gentle gleam. Beneath the table, a willow basket held scraps for the animals, the woven pattern tight and neat, its shape a perfect oval, made by patient fingers that wove stem by stem after the autumn rains. Each of these objects was as much a part of home as any stone or roof beam, crafted not for decoration, but for living and lasting. Nestled among the hearthstones sat a small brass kettle, its sides, softly dulled with age, etched lines and faint dents hinting at the many mornings it had hung over the flames. When poured, its spout let out a song as old as the house itself, a steam whistle that welcomed travelers and wakened sleepy children. Near the window, sunlight danced across the surface of a broad wooden platter, carved from a single pine round, now scored by knife and fork, living record of all the meals served upon it. On hooks along the wall, nets and mats of woven fiber hung to dry, their braided designs as intricate as any tapestry, enduring the endless cycle of salt, wind, and water. These modest things, whether whittled, hammered, or woven, were not only useful, they were reminders that everything made by hand carried both the spirit of its maker and the enduring memory of shared days. In their presence, the longhouse felt as sturdy and alive as any living thing, rooted, purposeful, and worn beautifully by the gentle hands of time. Even in the simplest movements around the home, the village's old beliefs and gentle superstitions found quiet life. When the elder reheated the barley porridge, they stirred the wooden spoon willingly, only in a sunwise circle, the same direction as the rising sun, a motion believed to keep good fortune spinning in with every meal. The young villager, without conscious thought, knocked softly on the pine frame of the table before taking the first bite, a reflex passed down from the stories of ancestors who claimed such a gesture would keep misfortune outside the door. At the end of the meal, both spent a moment brushing their crumbs into the hearth's flames, not only to keep pests at bay, but to please the spirits said to dwell in the warmth of home, ensuring the next loaf would rise high and golden. Every small action, half ritual and half habit, woven from memories and quiet faith, offered comfort against the unknown changing of seasons and the whims of land and sea. Visitors to the longhouse might miss the subtle touches, the way the villager set a sprig of dried sage above the door to guard against wandering spirits, or how the elder lingered at the window, turning a shell 3 times for luck before setting about a new day's work. Even while walking the stone path outside, it was tradition to avoid stepping directly on the largest stone, said to be the sleeping place of a house spirit who disapproved of careless feet. These customs, neither rigid nor spoken of often, shaped the rhythm of daily life in a way as natural as breathing. In every superstition and blessing, the family found not just protection, but reassurance, a sense that by respecting the old ways, they wove themselves into the same story as those who walked the path before them. Through careful gestures and humble tokens, belief lingered, offering quiet hope, gentle caution, and the promise that home remained a circle of safety and memory, no matter how the world outside might turn. As the sun made its slow journey overhead, the feeling in the village changed. Morning's gold softened into the clear brightness of afternoon. Time seemed to slip forward gently, dissolving hours into the steady rhythm of tasks and quiet conversation. Shadows gathered at the foot of the longhouse and stretched across the beaten earth, reaching into the corners of herb gardens, weaving lines between drying nets and the stone path. The warmth of the day grew, and so did the peaceful hush that followed the heart of daily business. The young villager paused outside with a bundle of gathered wool, watching the world shift. Sunlight now flickered high through leafy branches and shone with softer angles onto everything below. Each movement cast a longer shadow, his own merged at times with the elders', their outlines side by side on the ground, echoing the closeness that shaped their day. Inside, the light grew quieter, filtering through small windows in long bands that painted the floors, the sleeping platforms, and the curve of the hearth in amber and soft gray. The objects of the home, baskets, wooden bowls, the stoic brass kettle, seemed to change shape as the shadows crept, their outlines dissolving into gentle dusk. Even the sounds outside grew softer, as if the whole village knew that another chapter of the day was closing. Chickens wandered to the darker edges of their pen, while goats napped together beneath the lean shelter of a tilted plank. It was a time of gentle transitions, of setting aside work and errands in favor of slower conversations and simple comforts. The young villager and the elder, feeling the pull of the afternoon's calm, moved with more leisure, every task touched by the unspoken knowledge that light fades softly, and another evening, like so many before, waited just beyond the reach of their stretching shadows. As the afternoon wore on, a familiar sound echoed along the stone path. A wooden cart's wheels, creaking in steady rhythm, and the low, musical voice of a neighbor calling out in greeting. The young villager stepped outside to see old Gunnar, bundled in his worn cloak, guiding his sturdy pony with practiced hands. Balanced on the cart was a sack of fresh flour from the communal mill, a bundle of willow sticks for mending baskets, and cradled in a piece of blue-dyed linen, a handful of duck eggs, rare and precious this time of year. Gunnar handed off each parcel with gentle pride, trading a story for every item, his voice low so as not to disturb the goats still dozing under the eaves. The villager thanked him, sharing a polite joke and a smile before waving as Gunnar's cart rolled away toward the next house, wheels softly scattering stray feathers and petals along the path. With the deliveries now tucked safely inside the longhouse, the villager finished the day's mending, patching the last break in a fishing net using supple willow and smooth, precise hands. The elder, meanwhile, swept the hearth and sorted the remains of morning's work into neat piles, the movement slow and unhurried in the late sun. When the final knot was tied, the villager stretched, feeling the welcome ache of accomplishment, then held the repaired net up to the window, where golden light spilled through its woven diamonds and cast patterned shadows on the floor. The home grew quieter, the hum of daytime chores slipping gently into a hush that rang with a satisfaction deeper than words. Around them, other families were closing their doors, and the day's last deliveries, bags of salt, lengths of rope, baskets of greens, found their resting places. In that quiet, the simple joy of completion lingered, as strong and necessary as the sturdy walls, or the warmth ready to return each time the hearth's flames were kindled anew. As the sun dipped lower, its light brushed the village with lines of deepening amber, and the familiar rhythm of return began. From the far edge of the meadow, children ran first, bare feet quick and sure across grass, cheeks flushed with air and laughter, hands full of pebbles, wildflowers, or treasures found in the small secret places just beyond the path. Their voices, bright and clear, echoed from house to house as they darted through doorways, eager to share their findings with anyone who would listen. Behind them, workers from the fields and shore ambled in at a slower pace, baskets heavy with the day's catch or harvest, shoulders sun-warmed and tired. Greetings floated between neighbors, waves, and short chats, marking the shift from solitary labor to the comfort of gathering close. The return of each person felt like a gentle weaving, one by one. The threads of the day joined back together. Elders, too, made their way home, careful steps measured and deliberate as they leaned on whittled sticks or took the steadying arm of a grandchild when it was offered. Their clothing held the scent of the day, earth, sun, and the sweet tang of herbs picked in the quiet hour afternoon. At the edges of every home, animals sensed the changing pace, chickens returning to their coop with rustling wings, goats rousing from afternoon sleep and calling softly for attention. Inside the longhouse, the young villager and elder welcomed the return, a child's excited tale at the door, the soft thump of baskets on the floor, the laughter that filled the space like returning birds. The space of the home, quiet all afternoon, grew warmer, fuller with the familiar mingling of stories, gratitude, and the peace that came from knowing the world outside had not only been faced, but gently brought back home. As evening crept in, the warmth of the day softened, and the village felt a hush spreading over the land. Residual heat slipped quietly from the stones and rooftops, replaced by a gentle coolness that shimmered in the air and brushed soft relief over tired skin. The young villager, now standing by the open doorway, felt a cool breeze work its way through the house, carrying with it the mingled scents of earth, hay, and the last drift of salt from the windswept sea. Children finished their games with long shadows trailing at their heels, and the market lane, still echoing with the day's trades, grew quiet, save the low voices of neighbors parting with promises for the morrow. The animals, sensing the change, gathered at the edges of yards and fences, chickens settling in for the night, and goats tucking close to the warmth of shelter. Small fires flickered to life in hearths and fire pits, their glow a subtle answer to the shifting colors above. Above the rooftops, the sky transformed from the quiet gold of afternoon to an ever-deepening canvas of violet, blush pink, and indigo, the colors melting together as if painted by an unseen hand. Wisps of cloud floated high and slow, their edges rimmed in silver, where the first stars hesitated to appear. The elder stepped out for a moment, just to look upward, drawing a thin shawl closer around their shoulders and taking a deep breath of evening air. In that wide sky, the whole day seemed reflected, the cares and comforts of work, play, and gathering absorbed into a peaceful expanse. The change in color was more than a sign of nightfall. It was a quiet invitation for rest, a gentle promise that tomorrow would unfold just as surely, with its own radiant hues and honest tasks. Inside, soft voices and gentle hands finished the last of the day's chores, preparing to welcome the cool, starlit night. As the sky deepened into evening, the longhouse grew quieter, and the rhythm of another custom began. The young villager knelt near the hearth, placing small bundles of kindling, gathered by children in the afternoon, onto the remaining embers. With practiced ease, he blew gently, watching as orange sparks caught and flickered into new flame. The warmth built slowly, traveling outward and brightening the clay walls, lending the room a soft glow as the sun faded outside. The elder added thick logs, letting them rest at the heart of the fire, their grainy bark popping in the gentle heat. This nightly ritual was not hurried. Every movement was careful, a way to honor the fire's dual gifts of light and warmth. Around the room, shadows whispered and leaped, old memories returning in the glow, the feeling of security that comes only when darkness is held gently at bay. With the fire well started, it was time to prepare the evening meal. The villager set a blackened iron pot on a hook above the flames and poured water in from a leather bucket, listening for the slow simmer that would welcome a handful of split grains, scraps of cured meat, and diced roots from the day's harvest. The elder peeled onions at the table, the air tinged with a sharp, earthy aroma. Soon, the flavors of stew blossomed with each rising curl of steam. Herbs, onions, smoked fish, familiar and rich, calling everyone near. Outside, other families mirrored these preparations. Dusk brought thin lines of wood smoke, twisting from every roof, every window golden in the gathering dark. Fires burned low in side yards, some for warming faces and others for roasting the final meal, their comfort mixing with the cool air and the hush of evening. In the weaving of wood, flame, and food, comfort and tradition joined, turning the end of day into a gentle promise kept. As the first dancing flames began to fill the longhouse with warmth, the young villager reached for the bucket and stepped out into the evening's hush. The path toward the well was familiar underfoot, the stones cool and damp in the fading light, lined with tufts of grass still glistening from the day's sun. He paused at the well's rim, drawing water with steady hands, the rope creaking over wood as sunlit ripples shimmered far below. With the bucket brimming, he made his way back, passing the garden's sleepy herbs and the gentle huddle of goats winding down for night. Inside, the elder greeted his return with a nod of gratitude as he poured the clean, cool water into a clay basin near the hearth. The simple act of fetching water, tended just as countless ancestors had done, felt grounding, connecting their small rituals to the land and sky beyond the walls. With the warmth of the fire making the room soft and safe, the elder took a worn bundle of twigs tied with twine and swept the packed earth floor in careful strokes. Each sweep stirred up a faint scent of soil and wood, mixing with the onion and smoke in the air. The water splashed gently as the elder used a rag to dampen away the dust, following the same sweeping arc that shadow and firelight now traced across the room. Bits of straw, old shoes, and yesterday's ash were whisked to the side, the floor restored to quiet order for the night ahead. These evening chores, though simple, felt sacred, acts that made the house ready for sleep, peace, and the promise of another day. In the echo of wet swishes against the earth and the old rhythm of hands tending home, the villagers found comfort, a steady heart in the gentle hush of evening. The work of caring for place and kin quietly, humbly done. With the floor swept and darkness gently pressing in outside, the young villager moved through the home, drawing each wooden shutter closed with a soft thud. The day's lingering light faded from the small glass panes, now smudged with fingerprints and cooled by the night air. He checked the woven mats snug at the threshold, making sure no draft would disturb the comfortable cocoon they'd built within. Somewhere across the room, the elder carefully lowered a thick wool curtain, its border stitched decades ago, closing off the last window to the outside world. Inside, the light of the fire flickered brighter in the deepening dusk, shadows now contained and safe within sturdy walls. These gentle routines, repeated each evening, made the space feel wrapped and protected, a quiet fortress watched over by habit and care. Outside, a softer set of rituals unfolded in tandem. The goats, clustered together in the straw, were counted and quietly spoken to, their sides patted as the last handful of feed was scattered. In the coop, chickens settled on their perch one after another, feathers puffed and eyes half closed as the door was pulled shut against the coming chill. The villager paused, hand resting a moment on the warm fur of the old dog curled by the threshold, murmuring a wordless goodnight before locking the latch. With every animal tucked in and fed, the world outside seemed to hush itself as surely as the home within. The distant fields darkened into deep blue, and the village took on a feeling of gentle retreat, each window a golden promise against the darkness. As the evening closed around them, the young villager and elder found comfort in all that was safely gathered in, and in the peace of knowing nothing more was needed. Not until dawn, and another quiet beginning. With the home sealed against the cool night, the young villager and elder settled near the hearth, the evening's quieter tasks complete. The fire cast lazy patterns on the smooth clay walls, and brought a soothing reddish glow to the soft folds of the elder's shawl and the villager's earth-toned tunic. As the last light faded from the windows, a gentle hush settled in, broken only by the hush and crackle of the flames, and the low voices carrying the weight and warmth of family. The elder asked softly about the villager's favorite moment from the day, and the answer came unhurried, wrapped in the simple happiness of laughter at the goat's antics, and pride in fixing an old net. The elder smiled, perhaps remembering a similar day years ago, and in a few short, tender words recalled when the first patch had been sown, threading memory into the present moment. Their voices lingered, blending questions about tomorrow's, what tasks needed doing, what supplies might soon need replenishing, with the contentment of having all that really mattered already nearby. A repaired net, a warm meal, a quiet animal at the door, and the nearness of someone to share it all. When conversation lapsed into companionable silence, the fire continued to whisper, carrying old stories in its flickers, and softening the edges of the world beyond the door. The young villager and elder listened as if the past and future were woven right through the present hush, a last promise that home was more than wood, clay, or fire, but also the gentle voices wrapped in dusk. Finally, with a last smile and a wish for good dreams, the conversation faded, lingering like warmth in the pocket of a handmade cloak and settling gently among the walls, bidding the day a peaceful end. As the last conversation faded and the quiet deepened, the elder reached for a small brass oil lamp and lit its wick with a practiced flick of flint and steel. The lamp's gentle flame caught quickly, sending out a pool of golden light that softened every corner of the longhouse. Its steady glow reflected in the polished curve of the clay bowls and danced along the weathered wood grain of the table, painting flickering patterns that moved like silent stars across the walls. Another lamp was lit and hung from a peg by the sleeping platform, where it spread a softer, silvery shimmer, enough light to keep the darkness kind, not harsh. The young villager drew their blanket in a little tighter and watched as the gentle brilliance made each familiar shape. A woven basket, an old stool, the sagging edge of a wool curtain, glowed just enough to feel touched by something magical. In the hush, the light from the lamps hugged the sleepers close, their faces softened and peaceful, eyelids flickering as dreams awaited in the quiet warmth. The little flames bobbed slightly as the night breeze nudged the window frame, their reflections flickering in the glass like twin stars set deep in twilight. Throughout the home, the glow linked spaces together. The hearth still held a rosy gleam, the far shelf was etched by gentle gold, and even the ceiling beams seemed to shine faintly with shared memory. A sense of safety gently blanketed the room. The world outside retreated, leaving the soft chorus of flame, breath, and wool to fill the space. As the family slowly surrendered to rest, those humble lamps shone on, steadfast and kind, reminding all within the longhouse that light, however small, persists, and that every home becomes a universe of calm when the stars gather quietly overhead. With the home stilled and lamps casting their quiet glow, a soft hum began to float through the air, barely more than a whisper, and known well to the sleeping walls and weary beams. The elder, settling a woven blanket around their shoulders, hummed a tune from seasons past, low and warm, the melody winding with the sound of fire and the faint drift of wind outside. It was a tune born from memory, lullabies sung to tiny children, and wordless blessings passed from one day to the next. The notes settled on the room like a gentle sigh, weaving around clay bowl and curtain, touching the edges of the villagers' dreams as sleep arrived. The young villager, wrapped in the hush, breathed in slowly and allowed the hum to pull every loose strand of worry and restless thought from his mind, leaving only a calm, radiant peace that filled the last spaces of wakefulness. Outside, the village quietly released the last breath of the day. A final flutter of wings as the robin tucked deep into the hedge, the rustle of straw as goats gave a last contented turn, even the sea wind sighing through the thatched eaves, each hinted at a world drawing close and safe for the night. The elder's humming faded to a single, lingering note, and then even that was gone, replaced only by the easy, untroubled breathing of those gathered inside. Within the embrace of softly glowing lamps and the warmth of a tending fire, the house seemed to exhale along with its people, letting go of every task and every word, every laugh and silent hope, until nothing remained but gratitude and gentle dreams. Night lay gently over the longhouse, and the day, honored, sung, and remembered, became just another precious thread in the quiet tapestry of their days.